r/true off my chest, and the post reads as follows. I'm weirded out. I'm also going to be vague because obvious reasons. I'm 30s female, and my stylist is 40s. I got my haircut today at a stylist I've been using for about 9 months now. I think this is my 6th appointment with them. I usually do a trim or cut/style. Today I went from long hair, high lower back to an A-line bob. Again, since I started seeing this person, I usually get current style maintenance/trim. This time was a dramatic length adjustment, so they took a picture of the cut length in the floor to add to their social media, then intending to add before/after hours too. That's all totally fine and normal. They go grab a broom, sweep up the hair, and place the dustpan on the counter for a bit. Again, normal. They grab the broom and pan and head to the back of the shop. They're gone a few minutes, no biggie. Then they go out to smoke. But here's where it gets weird. The bathroom is in the back of the shop too. I need to go and step into the back. I don't really notice anything on the way into the bathroom. I go and start to head back out, but I notice my name on a small clear tote on the table. It has no lid, and it has my hair in it. At first, I didn't really think much of it, but I looked closer and see it's not just today's discarded hair, but looks like at least a few of my trim sessions mixed with, it looked like poopery and a little sand or something, and printed pictures of the hair with dates. The printer is sitting right next to it with today's discarded hair pick in the tray. There didn't seem to be any other containers like this when I looked around. It was really fucking weird. So I took a picture on my phone. I honestly didn't know what to think or do and went back out into the salon. They came back in, and I mentioned that I went to the restroom, and they seemed to freak out a little, but didn't mention it. I didn't really know what to say, so I just let them finish styling my hair, paid, and left. As a socially anxious introvert, this was my nightmare. I got home, and the more I looked at the picture, the more ick I got. I ended up texting them an hour ago, sending the picture, and requesting they remove the weird box of me and asking for an explanation. I said, quote, "Hey, so I saw this and didn't know what to make of it. Can you help me understand what this is and why you have it? I'm not comfortable with you having this and request you please discard the contents. Also, even though I loved my cut, I believe it's best if I find a different stylist." They haven't responded. LOL, what the fuck? And I mean, that is very, very weird. Obviously, the stylist is up to something because, like the OP said, they got a little bit freaked out when they came back and said that they used the restroom. And so, God, this is very weird. But let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, "Wow, that sounds strange. I'm curious as well. Good for you for sending the text message. I see your message as mature, fair, and calm." And I completely agree. I think the OP's text message was as fair and calm as it could have been, instead of being like, "What the fuck are you doing with my hair and pictures of it?" And then the OP responds to that comment saying, "I appreciate that, but full disclosure, it took me a few hours to get calm enough to send that. I'm totally freaked out." Someone else says, "You absolutely handled it better than I would have. I would have taken it and confronted them. This is really the beginning of some crazy I survived episode. Thank God you're not going back." And the OP responded saying, "I honestly had no clue how to respond. The whole situation was so bizarre, and I can't imagine what the purpose of this would be. I told my husband about it, and he got goosebumps, which was super scary for me, and it made me feel like I may have underreacted to the issue. But I guess I'm glad I got out without a confrontation while there, because who knows what may have happened if I'd brought it up then." And that's a good point. The person could have got defensive and done something irrational. But then the OP posts an update about 1 week later, and let's get into that update. It's been about a week, and with the holiday, I've been all over the place, but I ended up going to law enforcement to make a report last Monday. I'll likely end up going back if this person keeps contacting me like they have been. I'll give a little timeline. Last Saturday, haircut and discovered the weird tub full of my hair. Texted stylist about the weird tub and said I'd be finding a new stylist. Hairstylist didn't respond. This is where I left off in the last post. A lot has happened since then. Sunday, I woke up to a bunch of texts from the stylist. It woke me up because, even though I have DND on my phone, I have a setting that overrides that if there are repeated contact attempts over 3, in case of emergencies. Here's what I got. Copied and pasted. 3:49 a.m. Quote, I don't recommend going to a different stylist because of this. It's not a big deal. Small towns and people talk, and you may not find a new that will take you after this, so I'd reconsider. I don't like threats. And then 2 minutes later, so I have your biological material and it's mine property now. I can do what I want with it. I kept it because I can, and it means a lot to me. That is wildly creepy. And then 3 minutes later, why you send the pic? I know what it looks like, it's mine. And then 6 minutes later, you need to respond to me because I think it's a misunderstanding about what this is. It's NBT, and you saying you are switching stylists has me triggered. I do good work, clapping emoji. You said so. And then before I continue, quick note, these are all super late at night. 3:50 a.m., 4 a.m. I mean, maybe the stylist is up, but that is super late at night for the stylist to be responding. So I think that's just kind of a creepy side note. But then the stylist sends another text message 4 minutes later saying, I also charge a $350 client separation fee. So yeah, you can't just say you're switching stylists with more consequences. And I know you said you already tried a few people before me. They not many beauty people in the area. And then about 7 minutes later, asking for an explanation for a stylist having hair in a salon is crazy. What else would you find hair at? I didn't do nothing wrong, but I will get rid of it if you are gonna cry about it, but only if you say you won't be switching to new one else for your hair care. You made a lot as a client and always tip well and Indo good work, so it doesn't make sense and you know that, so maybe don't threaten someone who does your hair or hurt their heart emoji by making accusatory statements. And then the OP says, I didn't respond to any of those that morning because it was so insane to me. I need to process things fully before I make a decision on how to deal with it, so I just didn't respond. Sunday afternoon, I start getting phone calls. This person called me 14 times that afternoon. About every other call, they left a voicemail. Most of the voicemails just said, call me back or text me back, but 2 of them were unhinged. I'm going to paraphrase, but the gist of the first one was, sounds like they're crying, call me back, I'm getting scared you won't come back for me, for your hair for real. I just like how your hair feels, that's why I kept it. Call me. The second unhinged message was left late Sunday night at 11:38 p.m. and it said, quote, I got rid of it except for one lock. I found out I like watching your hair burn more than I liked keeping it. That is wildly creepy. I didn't respond to any of those messages, calls, or texts. This whole thing had me freaked out now. I decided by that time I was taking Monday off work to go to the police. Even if they couldn't do anything, I wanted a filed report of the weirdness. I woke up Monday to an email from the stylist with an invoice of $375 for client breach of contract fee as the chargeable line item. Again, copy and pasting here. The email body was just, quote, for being a bitch. It was sent from their business email too, so they're really doing everything they can to ruin themselves. Even if I had a contract with this nutter, which I don't, the original amount was for $350. They can't even get their extortion fees right. I did email them back stating that we had no contract and to cease all further communication with me from this point forward. I got ready and started heading to the police station around 9:45 Monday morning. I live in a rural area, so there are portions of my drive to and from our main town that doesn't have cell reception. When I finally got to town, I had 4 voicemails. I knew immediately who they were from. I talked to one of the officers on staff. They took my statements, a copy of the emails, asked me to forward all the texts and screenshots of the numbers of calls. They said, at the least, the calls and texts could be considered menacing and harassment, but the voicemail where they mentioned how they like burning my hair was potentially concerning. The officer advised I contact a legal representative in case this person tries to take the bogus invoice to a civil suit court. And they said I'm welcome to change my number, but having the piling evidence if they continue to contact me after I explicitly told them not to in the email would only help me. I reached out to a lawyer Tuesday and left a detailed message regarding the situation. They are apparently out of the office until next Wednesday for the holiday, so we'll see if they have any advice. I've since received many texts and calls from the stylist. They sent a happy Thanksgiving text on Thursday morning as well. Regardless, they are giving me a lot of evidentiary material to work with, but I'm so unsettled. I can't wait to hear from the lawyer this week. And now let's get into some of the top comments on that update. Someone says, OP, this person is an actual psychopath. Please keep yourself safe and aware. They could do some unexpected, unhinged shit at any moment now that their obsession has turned on them. And the OP responds saying, I'm taking every possible measure to prevent anything else from occurring. But you're not far off the mark. This person is certainly not stable. I found out more that I will include once I can confirm without a doubt it is true. But regardless, I really appreciate everyone's concern. I'm doing everything I am legally able to keep safe. And then the OP makes a mini update in the comments that reads as follows. I woke up to new comments and requests for updates. Firstly, I am okay and safe for now. The person has continued to contact me on a regular basis via phone and email. I do have personal protection that I'm comfortable with and can wield with accuracy. But I'm nearly certain this person does not know where I live, so I don't anticipate any type of confrontation here. Our house and property has complete camera coverage as well. If anyone or anything shows up, we are well aware. I will be posting a more in-depth update with more text and emails up to this point, and regarding a specific incident that happened on Friday. On Tuesday, I have an appointment to speak with another officer, then to discuss the potential of criminal action and legal consequences for the stylist as a result. Thank you all for your concern and the validation that this is absolutely insane. I'll leave you with a text from this past week, one that I think you'll all enjoy. Question, used for a model of how not to make friends. Once again, copy and pasted. 5:12 a.m. quote, don't never say never. You're never coming back, don't make me laugh. I don't want your ass back, you can beg me though. Might help. And then the OP makes another update 4 days later, and the update reads as follows. I didn't expect the crazy amount of people following this. Here is the long-awaited post. Also, long post. Sorry for the delay. I think I mentioned before, I'm a processor, so it takes me a while to work through my thoughts and feelings on things. This situation and update not be as satisfying as many would have hoped, but here it goes. I met with law enforcement again this past Tuesday. My husband and I drove over early that morning because I was also meeting up with the lawyer I'm working with. Aside from the near constant texts, calls, and emails, I wanted to pursue legal action for a specific issue. Allegedly, the stylist had tried to have my credit card canceled. Apparently, they used the last 4 digits of my card, called the customer service line for the card, and tried to cancel it. I got a call from the fraud department shortly after this person attempted to do this, trying to verify everything to see if I actually wanted to close my account and dissolve my credit line with them. To be clear, the stylist was not successful in their alleged attempt. They couldn't provide the basic information you need for such things, like my actual last name. It's unusual, and they gave a name that was almost similar, date of birth, address, etc. Apparently, they thought they could accomplish this with just my name, phone number, and the last 4 digits of the card number. I didn't cancel the card, but did request a new one for obvious reasons. I had no clue why they would want to cancel my card. To inconvenience me? Yep, that's exactly why. Allegedly. When I spoke with the credit card company, they agreed to send over the recording of the person that called, as well as the phone number the call originated from, as long as the request came from law enforcement with a warrant. They gave me a phone number and reference number for the police to reach out to directly. The officer began working on that immediately, so that is in progress. I went to my phone company over the weekend, I had my phone number transferred to an old phone so I could still receive calls and texts there, but got a new phone number for my actual phone. The old phone and phone number has been turned over to the officer assigned to my case. They did go and speak with this person yesterday. Apparently, they are horrified I went to the police and had no idea any of their crazy could be a chargeable offense. According to the officer, there have been no further communications via text or call since their last visit, and I haven't received any other emails. A temporary protection and no contact order has been issued against them until the first court date. I've also reached out to the State Board of Licensing with all of this information and my complaints. All I can say is they are investigating. Outside of that information, I'm limited on any other information I can share since a legal process against this person has officially begun. We are just waiting to see how this all plays out now. It's been a long few weeks. I'm hoping for the best here. I'm already so relieved to no longer be getting calls, texts, or emails constantly. Thank you for all the concern, advice, and good wishes. This was meant to be an outlet for me to vent and process, and I'm so grateful that you have allowed me to do that with the huge amount of support you have given. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, I'm glad you are safe, and they have stopped contacting you once they realized police enforcement was involved. Shameful they didn't stop until law enforcement was involved. At least you can sleep easily, knowing they cannot contact you and do not know where you live. Absolute insanity. They attempted to cancel your credit card though. I hope you get the best possible outcome for this situation. I'm so sorry you are going through this. And the OP responded saying, I really appreciate it. It's been a roller coaster for my household for sure. Another commenter says, I'm glad you are getting it sorted and have taken this serious. Hopefully the police have scared them enough to permanently leave you alone. You never know what crazy people will do. And then the OP responds saying, the officer implied that this person was legitimately Pikachu-faced when they showed up, and the lack of further contact indicates they really didn't have a clue that they were breaking the law. Another commenter says, people amaze me with how much crazy they think they can get away with. I'm so glad you are doing everything the right way. And the OP responds saying, my lawyer has been critical in making sure I'm protected legally and physically. I'm starting to think this person was one of those who uses escalation to get their way, or intimidating people into doing what they want them to do. This time, it backfired. And then we didn't hear from the OP in 13 long months. No update in 13 months, and everyone was worried sick on what happened to the OP. But then the OP gave us an update 13 months later, titled Long Overdue Update. I'm unsure how satisfying or inflammatory this will be, but I've received tons of comments, DMs, and overall requests for an update. I've been reluctant to revisit any of this for a few reasons, all selfish. In general, none of what happened over the last year or so was fun. There was a legal process in which I was granted a 1-year RO, restraining order, against the stylist. This process took a while to get to court and be heard with continuations for various reasons, but here is the gist of what happened. The stylist showed up to all the court proceedings, had a variety of allegedly fabricated evidence to show the court that I was the one harassing them. They had supposed screenshots of text from my number, threatening to harm them, calling them names, threatening to show up at their business and burn it down. The issue with this evidence? The phone number the texts were coming from was on a phone that was in possession of the officer on my case. I had already gotten a new phone number by the time these texts were being sent. The officer had a certified readout of the phone's activity while in his position, and no calls or texts were outgoing after I surrendered that phone. There were none. The stylist seemed very surprised by that information. I don't think they even considered that I might get a new phone or number. The stylist implied that I had someone else do it, or that I spoofed it from my new number and tried to demand my new number as part of the discovery of evidence. That was not granted. I did have to have law enforcement do another certified review of my current phone, and to protect us further, my husband's phone as well, showing that I or anyone I was in contact with had not downloaded any spoofing software to use against this person or attempted to contact them. That felt icky, but was necessary and also very validating. They did have a lawyer, but the lawyer seemed very coed. I really believe the representation was not confident in their case, especially with the texts and calls this person was said to have received. The tone, grammar, and language used in those communications were not native to the way I speak or text. I hate text speak and rarely use it, especially with anyone I'm not intimately familiar with. The evidence they presented with the text was riddled with it. I do use slang, bestie, but if I don't know you well, you're going to get my customer service communications. All that to say, whomever was sending those texts were not me. I don't care to speculate about who did send them, but they read like bad cop dramas. Ultimately, the bench trial was in my favor. The stylist was given no contact with a 1-year RO, ordered to pay all my legal fees and a small monetary amount. To date, that has not been settled. On to the aftermath. A few weeks go by and things took a turn. Random notes on my car would pop up when I would go to the grocery store about what a bitch I am and I'll get what's coming to me. Vehicles slowing down in front of our house and throwing eggs, or honking their horn over and over in the middle of the night. I'm not stupid. I know who it is. And now they have my home address with all the RO filings. Thankfully, I also have cameras everywhere on my property. I would call the cops. They'd say they would look into it. It would continue. My tire got slashed when I was at dinner with my husband. The restaurant did not have cameras at an angle that would show us who, but I have a good idea. Their salon location was only 2.5 blocks away. Small towns can be great until everyone and their mama knows where you are and when you're in town. This goes on for months. We make a report for each and every instance and occurrence. Finally, the cops really started looking into it more. We gave them everything we had. The car on our footage was not registered to stylist. When the cops went knocking at the owner's house, they claimed they were paid to go, quote, piss off this bitch by stylist, but I thought it was a prank situation. They were cited for vandalism and disturbing the peace and were trespassed from our property. Their car was never near our property again after that. Stylist was brought in for violating the RO. I thought it would be over. Was essentially a slap on the wrist. Cycle continues. Stylist finally spends a few nights in jail after the 5th or 6th instance of violation. Then stylist files a lawsuit for defamation of character against me for, get this, $200,000. According to my stylist, my defamatory remarks cost them from clientele and license. I didn't know it, but their license had been suspended. I guess my report to the licensing bureau worked. Stylist claimed I cost their yearly salary of $200,000. What small town stylist makes this? And demanded reparations for defamation, claiming that my RO was granted under false evidence and cost them their reputation and livelihood. I contact my lawyer again and we start our defense. Lawyer does all the lawyer things. I'm advised I can countersue at this point, but I just want everything to be over. The case doesn't see a judge for a while. We go, both sides are heard. Case is dropped without prejudice. At this point, we've had enough. Once the RO is up for renewal, we make a different choice. We moved. We sold our house, traded in our old cars, and dipped. I didn't want this person to ever have access to me or mine again. It has been 5 months in our new home, and things have been exponentially more peaceful, but I'm so pissed off that it came to us moving. I loved our house, our community, and the area we lived in. I'm sorry I hadn't updated. I just really hate thinking about this one time I had a weird ass fucking encounter with my hairstylist that led to a nearly year of hell. So that's it. That's the update. I had time today. It's a new year separate from the crazy, so here it is. And honestly, that's all I'm giving after everything. I just want to forget it. And then the OP makes one more small update in the comments of this post that reads as follows. I saw this pop up on Scaling Stories. I love them on TikTok and couldn't believe people still cared enough to share. Thank you. But there is a moment I failed to mention that my husband said y'all might be interested in. So while the notes, tire slashing, and egging was happening, the stylist found themselves in a bit of a pickle, which is what ultimately helped us get police to act and arrest. The community Facebook page started posting about some nut job was vandalizing cars and houses and harassing people. I guess one of the folks who worked at the counter house / sheriff's office, they're in the same building, kept seeing all the reports I was making about my car, house, and all the other stuff. Like I said, small towns are fun. They were nosy enough to want to gossip about it, but not enough to look into it and see that it was the only one family in the community being victimized by the nut job. The post, of course, had everyone up in arms and claiming they were victimized too, but never reported it because they didn't know it was happening to others. At first, it didn't click that it was my situation that everyone was talking about until it was mentioned that tires were slashed at a popular local restaurant. But you know who clocked it right away and couldn't help themselves from commenting? The stylist. They commented on every post about the psycho targeting people like this, with stuff like, paraphrasing, quote, "You need to stay out of it. You don't know what these people have done to have this happen to them. Maybe they aren't so innocent and deserved it." They also were calling out people who claimed to be a victim too, with stuff like, quote, "You know damn well that's a lie. Nothing happened to you," because, duh, stylist was only targeting me and had to defend themselves. They always commented variations of the same thing on every comment, calling them crazy and a shitty person. Chat. When I say stylist got dog walked in the comments, I'm not exaggerating. It was one of the most validating moments during the worst part of the whole ordeal. People called them vile for trying to defend someone who was clearly crazy and a garbage human being, was flamed for victim blaming, had their business page reported and rate bombed by keyboard warriors because, of course, stylist was commenting on the post using their business profile and was subsequently banned from the page. Their business Facebook had a 1-star rating and eventually disappeared. I stayed out of all of this completely, never revealing I was the person they were defending, just taking never screenshots of the stylist's responses for later evidence. The post eventually got removed after I gave all the screenshots of the post to the detective working my case, with them verifying and taking their own screenshots from the official sheriff's office account. And the sheriff had a talk with the court's employee about posting stuff they see that comes across their desk. The worker had very proudly began their post with, quote, "I work at the courthouse and this is happening in the community, and we're told under no uncertain terms to refrain from that type of action moving forward." Anyways, this was probably the only genuinely funny thing to happen during the hell I was living through, and I thought I'd share. Thanks again for all the support and well wishes. We are okay now and working to rebuild the happiness we had before in a new place. And that is the last update we have received from the OP, and I don't think we're going to have any more for a long, long time because I think the OP just wants to forget about this entire horrific ordeal and move on with their lives. Today, I effed up by moving in with psychopaths. I really effed up. First off, I'm a 23-year-old girl. I don't know how relevant that is. So about 2 months ago, I found myself with no money after having to put hundreds of dollars into my poor car over the course of 5 months. Brakes and rotors were replaced, master cylinder replaced, water pump busted and it had to be fixed, serpentine belt, etc. Finally, the head gasket blew and I'd spent all of my savings on my car right when I lost my job. I was working at a bookstore that was due to close on July 4th. I had another job lined up working for the online portion of the store, but my boss wasn't going to bring me on to start packing / shipping / listing for another month, and I was truly out of money. A friend from high school, calling her Jamie, had been insisting on me moving out to California to work on her cannabis farm with her for about a year. Offered to pay for my plane ticket, told me I had a room, told me I'd be making $15 an hour full time. It was the best pay I've been offered. I graduated high school but didn't attend college. But I didn't want to do it simply because it was so far away from my comfort zone and everything I valued most. Now, I don't have a bunch of friends. This was the year that I cut all the toxic people out of my life, as far as I could tell before this particular incident. But my friends that I do have are incredibly important to me and have dragged me out of some of the darkest moments of my life. I knew that I couldn't prioritize my friends in this situation. It was officially about saving my own ass. Well, having absolutely no money, I started to feel like a burden to my mother, whom I'd been living with for a year, to get back on my feet. It was working just fine. I saved up a good amount of money and finally bought a car. But you know what ended up happening with the car. I was supposed to save up and get an apartment by August, but my car is where all of my money went. In addition to gas, food, and necessities, with the occasional small weed purchase, maybe $20 once a month. Basically, I found myself feeling like moving out of here was the best option. Good money, awesome friend that I had made a lot of cool memories with in high school, etc. It started to sound more and more attractive the more I thought about it. I had a long talk with her, and she booked me a ticket. Not before I verified that our operation was legal, that I'd have my own room/private space, that I'd have a job, and that I'd like her husband. She verified all these things with confidence, and I flew out. This was 3 weeks ago. I'd like to point out before this next part that I am a skeptic by design, and I made damn sure I was certain it was a good idea before coming out. She and I talked every day until I flew out, and I never would have gathered that anything was out of the ordinary. Well, the first night, I learned that none of the above would be true. This friend of mine somehow managed to lose her mind over the last 3 years. It's been since she moved to California. First off, she's married to a psychotic ex-homeless person that all call Jack. She just met this guy on the beach and fell in love. Got married pretty much instantly. I never would have pinned her as that sort of girl, but I quickly learned that she'd changed. I couldn't stand her husband from the get-go, as he was clearly on some whole other level of crazy. He interrupts every 3 seconds because he only likes to listen to himself talk. He's obsessed with the Illuminati and a bunch of other conspiracies. He's incredibly condescending and pretentious about his beliefs. I learned all of it on the second day. He's incredibly disrespectful and oblivious to the way his words and actions affect others. Oh, and he's a crybaby about everything. Still, I sucked it up. I'd already flown out here, and I was already stuck. Second, I have no room or private space. My bedroom is a mattress pad on the floor in the corner of the kitchen. I still sucked it up because I'm not about to be ungrateful about where I'm sleeping, but then I discovered that, lo and behold, they have 2 kittens, and the litter box is in the kitchen about 10 feet away from my bed. Still, didn't complain because, again, I'm stuck out here anyway. Third, I found out on day 2 that her husband is growing an insane amount of mushrooms. Illegal. Not cool. Still didn't care because I figured they weren't under any pressure from the law. Well, that isn't true either, because I then found out that not only is Jamie on parole, but her parole officer organized a raid of their house just a week before I flew out, when my ticket was already paid for. They found nothing because all of their illegal things are located elsewhere in the vicinity, but apparently that shit can happen at any time. Fourth, no cell service here, so no way to call or text my friends and family that I'm really close to, unless they had iPhones, and I was able to catch a Wi-Fi signal on the phone, which is rare. I had to reactivate my Facebook. I despise Facebook, just to keep in touch with my loved ones because they do have a weak Wi-Fi signal here, but that was the least of my worries. Obviously, I didn't consider that too awful until I realized how bad things would be out here. Fifth, their plants are illegal. She told me that in this particular area, you can have X amount of plants. She's got a lot more than that. I had no idea until she saw me taking a picture to send my close friends. She then acted like she told me all along that this was an illegal operation. I still have the text to verify that this is not the case, but I didn't want to throw that in her face because I'd realized by now that nothing about this is stable. I'll stop numbering my points now. We got in a fight over the picture I took that night. She went into full crazy mode, told me that she couldn't believe I would be so stupid, how she felt like having me out here was a mistake because of my terrible judgment, and how fucked up I was for thinking that was okay. It was my understanding that the law was not being broken. Why else would I travel across the country to live with somebody? Certainly not to be a part of something insanely illegal, but I digress. It escalated. I tried to keep a level head and explain how I've been trying to wrap my mind around this entire situation and that I was told the opposite of just about everything that was going on here. Did I mention her kittens have been shitting and pissing in my clothes, bed, and blankets since day one? She told me I was ungrateful and that they had a teepee on their property that I was going to have to go live in because I was interfering with their marriage. I left out that part about Jamie making one comment to Jack that upset him so much he threw a huge glass plate at her that then shattered all over the porch. They fought constantly to the point that I would be inside crying and feeling sorry for myself for making such a horrible decision to come out here. I should point out I got a job my third day here, and it worked 4 days when this fight occurred. At one point in the fight, Jamie told me she was taking me to the airport to send me home and make me pack all my things, get dressed, and walk out the door. In that period of time, I emailed my boss to tell her that I wouldn't be able to work for them anymore because I was being sent back home, and I didn't want them to not have someone to work for me in the morning. By the time Jamie changed her mind, I emailed my boss to let her know, JK, my roommate's just crazy, paraphrasing, and I lost my job based on my unreliable living situation. So she told me I had to go live in this teepee. No electricity, no water, bathroom, kitchen area, or anything. A glorified tent. The only thing about it that's livable is that there's a bed inside, but it gets freezing here at night and hot as fuck during the day, with no way to contact anyone, in the middle of the woods in a town where S-word offenders and R-wordists are apparently everywhere. I wasn't told this either. And drugged out bums roam through the woods constantly. She painted it as a perfect little place for me. It broke my heart because, well, I didn't move all the way out here to live off the grid in a tent in the woods. I've pretty much reached a point where I've got to head back to my hometown. My boss has my paycheck waiting for me up at my old work, which is about $150. So I'm just trying to figure out a way to discuss this with Jamie and Jack that won't end in an absolute disaster. After all, they'd be the ones driving me all the way back to San Francisco, like 2 hours away, to fly home. So I'd have to end this on good terms, which is extremely difficult when you're dealing with people that are not even remotely stable. Everything here is an argument or a test, and so many laws are being broken. I've been deprived of so many things. I haven't eaten in 3 days because I just haven't felt even a little bit of an appetite. You'd think I'd be sitting here stoned all the time since I'm in California, but unfortunately, nah. I can't find weed to save my life, and their plants haven't fully matured. There's a lot of things that I left out, but wow, what a disaster. I guess the takeaway from this is that I'm an idiot, and I should have never assumed somebody would be in the same way they were 3 years prior. I don't have any idea of what's happened in the last 3 years, but she's a different human being altogether. Almost like she hit her head really hard on something and developed a new bizarre and terrifying personality. I couldn't have predicted this if I were getting paid to. I've kept my parents posted about this from the beginning, but I've been ashamed. I've only told 2 close friends about all this because I feel like they're the only ones that won't think I'm a complete dumbass for all of this, having known Jamie in the past. I made a lot of bold statements about how well I was going to do out here and how excited I was to make good money and set my life up pretty sweet-like. I was really looking forward to this, and every single day has been a nightmare in its own special way. I'm just hoping I can make it out of here before the law shows up and tears them open, or before they do something awful to me. I don't trust these people. I'm uncomfortable every minute I'm around them. If they try to move me into this teepee before I can afford my plane ticket, I'll deal with it, but I fear for my life and my sanity living in that teepee. Even if I needed one of them for something, it's a pretty long way back to the house, and they're literally attempting to up and banish me. How they expect me to find another job is beyond me. I'm willing to work, but I'm miles away from town. I had a bike. I wanted to leave this part out, but they gave me a bike and it ended up being a stolen bike that belonged to my coworker. Oh my God. That's a whole other ordeal I don't like going into because this is long enough. But the bike has been returned and I now have no transportation except for Jamie. Too bad she can't drive me anywhere if I don't even have the means to ask for a ride. And she works an unpredictable schedule. I know this was really long, but if you do read it, please don't throw me into the flames. This has been incredibly devastating for me and just an all-around terrifying experience, and I just want to go home. I know I fucked up. I'm trying to make it right. And I mean, before we move on, I just have to give some of my thoughts because I'm trying to process all of this because it's so wild. But the OP moved out to California because she thought she'd have a good opportunity to get a job and all that, legal, which is great. But now she's here. She lost her job that she had there. She has no way to get back to society without asking an unstable, crazy person. And also, these crazy people's operation could be shut down at any moment, which would most likely mean the OP gets arrested as well for being affiliated. And oh my God, and she can't get back to society, period. And she has no money left. She has nothing. And now she's stuck with bad Wi-Fi and a phone and living in a teepee. This is a bad situation, and I'm very worried for the OP, but let's continue because I want to see where this goes. The OP makes an edit saying, "Oh my God, guys, I am so sorry. I have not had any access to the internet since I posted this, except when I've been with my roommates, and I haven't been able to come back to this. I'm reading my responses now. I'm so sorry for freaking guys out. I didn't expect anyone to actually read this. Also, thank you so much for the gold. You didn't have to do that, but that was really sweet of you. Thank you. Edit 2, I'm overwhelmed right now. I'm so sorry. This entire experience has been extremely difficult for me, and I've never been good at articulating without going into a million paragraphs. Just know that I'm fine right now. I'm not at the TP. I'm supposed to be moving to the TP this week, and I can tell that it's coming up. But just know that for right now, I'm still at the house because Jamie has been working all week. Now, I've been using Reddit for 3 years, and this is the first time I've truly felt the community here. I've never seen this many messages in my inbox, and I don't even know how to begin. But I'm going to try to respond to everyone. I cannot stress enough how much it means to me that so many people are willing to talk to me or help me. I can't put this into words. I truly do not know what to say. Thank you all of you. Fuck. I'll be spending the entire day in town today at a coffee shop where I get free Wi-Fi. The internet at the house comes and goes and is extremely inefficient for loading page after page. I'll be in town until much later this afternoon. I'm having them drop me off to find a job, which I will be doing if I get around to reading and responding to everyone. Thank you again, and I'm sorry for vanishing. I will not do that again now that I know people actually saw this and give a shit. I'm sorry. Edit 3. I should also point out that I spoke to my friend back in St. Louis, my mother's old neighbor that I used to do yard work for and drink wine/watch shitty horror movies with. She's an awesome woman. She told me that she has a room for me back in St. Louis. I've just got to fly back out there. I'm picking up the money that I made for the brief stint at the pizza place and seeing if I can afford a plane ticket. If not, my dad said he could possibly help me out. I might take one of you guys up on a ride to the airport, but not if I don't have something to give you in return. So I'm going to work on that. Also, this is definitely not fiction. I'll post some proof when I get back to town and have Wi-Fi on my phone as well as my computer. And then the OP posts some proof saying this is really the best I can do without giving away myself or location away. And she posts 2 photos, one of the room and one of the broken plate. And the room photo, you can just see the pretty rough living conditions she's living in on a mattress on a floor in the kitchen. Yeah, just looks pretty rough. And like the OP said, her clothes have been getting pissed on and shitted on by the kittens, which is horrible. So I'm sure she doesn't have a lot that's clean. And the OP is just obviously in a very bad position. In the second photo of the plate, it is just plate shards on the ground with a paper behind it that has the writing of signs of a broken home. And yeah, wow, that's some proof for us. And let's continue. And oh shoot, there is actually a third photo the OP included that says something Jack gave me on my second day here. And she posts a photo of a DVD, I think, of the GMO conspiracies he's really into, which is kind of funny. It says the GMO trilogy, why genetically modified organisms threaten your health, the environment, and future generations. So that is just a kind of conspiracy DVD. And I think that's kind of a funny thing that he gave to her on the second day there. And she also says, my fingers are purple and gross looking because Jamie had me dye her hair purple the night before and didn't buy any gloves. I'm not seriously lacking in blood circulation. And something I didn't add previously was that the OP said that Jamie, the husband or whatever, was super into like GMO conspiracies and that sort of stuff. And so that's why he gave her that DVD. But let's continue. The OP makes an update a few days later saying, if you're around TIFU last Tuesday, you might have come across my original Today I Fucked Up post about moving in with a friend from high school that turned out to be nuts plus married to someone who's also nuts. Hardcore conspiracy theorists, Illuminati, anti-GMO, all that bullshit, all peppered on top of a terrible living situation in a toxic marriage altogether. That's about as detailed as I'm going to get about that aspect of it in this post, and I'd rather not make this post as long. So please refer to the previous post before asking any questions. Just know that I made my original post when I thought I'd completely run out of options, and I went into a terrible downward spiral. There was a 24-hour period where I couldn't come back to this account. This is a throwaway for obvious reasons, and I just expected my post to have been buried during that time frame. Well, I'm an idiot because I logged in to find hundreds and comments and messages from people that actually took the time to read my story. People offering me anything from advice to bus tickets to places to stay. People from all over the country, especially the dozens of fantastic California locals that proved to me that I've been just associating with the wrong people. I still can't find the words to adequately thank those of you that came forward and wanted to help me out. Through a lot of people suggested I start a GoFundMe for myself so I could get home, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't think of a number that would have made sense to me to not make me feel like I look selfish. After all, it didn't write that post for profit. I wrote it because I was going through the toughest experience of my life and I dreaded even waking up in the morning. I just needed someone to talk to. I gained plenty of people to talk to, and you are all insanely awesome. That being said, there were two people in particular that came in clutch and truly saved my ass. The first Redditor I was comfortable talking to in depth about the situation was a software engineer living in the Bay Area who I will refer to as AI, seeing as he was extremely lovable. He doesn't even use Reddit much, but he saw my story and he wanted to help. He offered to pick me up and allow me to stay with him, as well as any other help I'd need. This blew my mind because this man lived 2.5 hours away and insisted on helping me anyway, just because he's a wonderful human being. While discussing an escape plan with AI, I've been talking with another Redditor that I'll call Lee. I'll start by saying that he wishes to remain completely anonymous, so I'll leave out his profession and any other specifics. Just know that this man is also truly wonderful. His original message stated that he wanted to buy me a plane ticket. Obviously, I was resistant to just about every Redditor that offered me help in the beginning because I've always been insecure when asking for help. But both Lee and AI separately calmed my nerves and insisted in helping me out of that terrible situation regardless of my doubts. I agreed to let Lee buy me a plane ticket, and AI and I decided we would arrange the kidnapping for 2:30 in the morning on Saturday, after Jamie and Jack went to sleep. Sadly, there was no plausible way to meet any other way without my roommates finding out what was going on. I didn't tell them a thing. Granted, they hadn't bought the TP situation back up in a couple days, but I knew it was coming, and I knew they wouldn't react favorably to me leaving. When Friday rolled around, I knew it was my last day, so I washed every article of clothing I'd brought with me, even if it was already clean, just to get the essence of that house out of it. There was a constant funk in the air. It didn't appear unusual to Jack or Jamie because it just looked like I was doing laundry. And plus, they ended up leaving in the early afternoon, which made it much easier for me to scan the house for anything I'd left behind. They ended up staying out much later than anticipated. I was starting to panic when it got to be around 11 p.m., but then they finally pulled up. I was sitting outside of my laptop when Jamie walked behind me and went inside the house. Jack then came up and told me he'd spent the afternoon cleaning out the teepee, but that they'd brought me a box of bug bombs, which I'd be responsible for administrating before cleaning the spiders out of the teepee myself. I just smiled and nodded along, knowing I was leaving anyway. At the end of his speech, he said, "By the way, Jamie paid like $7 for these, so if you want to reimburse her," then went inside. I had my $80 or so left over from my only paycheck after giving her gas money, and part of that was a few single bills. I asked her if $6 would be okay. Her response was, "Well, I was thinking more like 100, for half your ticket out here." it was her plan to take all of my check and have me move out to live in a tent with no money the next day. Nope, I lied and told her that I had a payment due that I hadn't paid yet and that I was sorry. The reality being that the money was all I had to make it once I arrived back in St. Louis. She believed me, although visibly frustrated, and went to sleep. AI arrived on time in the most expensive car I have now ever set foot inside of my life. It was surreal. We got my suitcase and bag into the car in about 15 seconds and took off without a single issue. It couldn't have been more perfectly timed, and AI was extremely punctual, considering the confusing location of the house. I spent the weekend in his beautiful condo and got to meet his roommates. Two super cool women who, with AI, were extremely polite and hospitable to me, considering I was clearly doing far worse than them in every possible category. Just excellent people all around. They made the bizarre nature of my situation much more palatable with their kindness. Plus, they had two kittens that didn't use my sleeping area as a litter box, which is always a plus. And one of them had thumbs, and the OP posts a picture of the cat with thumbs. What a cutie. Oh, that's cute. And then the OP says, when I wasn't busy wandering around their cool little city and hanging out with those guys at their condo, I was talking to Lee, the Redditor that paid for my plane ticket. Lee is something to behold as well, because you would not even believe the incredible emails he sent me. This man doesn't even know me, and he took the time to truly speak to me and convey his faith in me. I swear that this man breathed new life into my previously shot self-esteem and warmed my heart. He made sure that if at any point in time I needed any sort of assistance, that he was always on my standby. And not only that, but he spoke with such sincerity and depth that every email had me in tears. What are the odds that the two Redditors I'd end up connecting with would end up being two of the most selfless and beautiful people I've ever met? I'm so grateful that one website that I've just used for entertainment all these years has connected me to these two complete strangers and flipped my perspective in humanity. If it weren't for Lee and AI, I wouldn't be sitting here on a comfortable bed in my own room in St. Louis, writing a happy Reddit post today. I'm living with an old neighbor, as I mentioned in an update in my last post. She's awesome, and we've known each other for years. She's been aware of this entire situation as it's happened and is letting me stay as long as it takes to get back on my feet. Needless to say, I'm already working on that. I don't have a car anymore, unfortunately, but I do have a bike out here and a lot more options for work. It shouldn't take me long for me to pull myself together, especially not with the help that my two new friends provided. I wish that I could send both of them gigantic edible arrangement bouquets, but I might have to settle for postcards for now. Thank you to everyone that cared about my story. Thank you to everyone that wanted to help. And all of you that were absolutely ready and willing to donate money, shelter, rides, etc. to my cause just because you're good people. Thank you especially to AI and Lee. I hate not being able to use your real names for going above and beyond and completely out of your way to ensure my safe passage back to my hometown. I truly hope that I'll be able to return the favor someday. Lee pointed out that he wanted me to return the favor by channeling my voice into writing one day and getting a journal. My new roommate has since gifted me with this, and it is a leather-bound journal, super awesome. And then the OP says, here is a note from me saying, thank you Reddit, by Karma, 292. Listen to Karma, by Massive Attack, or literally anything by those guys. It's insanely good music, but hey. And then the OP says, I guess that's all I wanted to say. That Reddit really can be an incredible community when it comes right down to it. And I'm living proof that the people on this website are capable of incredible things. I am so grateful to this website to stumble upon my new friends that helped me get home. So grateful to stumble upon for originally helping me stumble upon Reddit in 2011. Praise. I love you, Redditors, and I love you, Lee and AI. Thank you so much for everything that you've done. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, what were the craziest reaction to you moving out in the dead of night? I hope they were pissed. And the OP responds saying, I blocked Jamie on all social medias and from my iPhone the night I left. There has been zero contact, surprisingly enough. Someone else says, Jesus, it sounds like she was lucky to escape unscathed. Thank God for Reddit. Someone else says, my blood went cold when Jamie asked OP for $100. She had already caused the loss of her job. Now she was going to take her cash and send her outside. Someone else says, so happy she got out. While reading, I was ready to Venmo what I could afford if she hadn't left yet. I'm also so grateful to the people who did help her. And I hope what they did is being paid back and good things happening for them as well. And then someone else says, I wonder what happened to Jamie and Jack after she left. And yeah, I think this is one of the best case scenarios. I mean, 2 Redditors helped her out. 2 Redditors that weren't creeps, by the way. I mean, I would have been very scared if I was the OP, that they are weirdos that are going to abduct me as well, or something like that. But the OP is so lucky here. I mean, the OP was completely stranded in the middle of the California woods with no money, no contact, no transportation, no nothing. They could have easily been murdered out there, kidnapped, or God knows what worse. Seriously, like if Jack and Jamie took her phone, she would have been done. There's no way she could have contacted the outside world without walking miles through the woods, through apparently drug addict infested woods. And that could have been a very bad situation. I mean, honestly. And we saw at the end there when Jack or Jamie asked for $100, that would have left the OP completely cashless with no money. And I'm sure if the OP didn't pay up, they would have gotten mad and done God knows what. But this is seriously such a scary situation. And the OP is just so lucky that they had Wi-Fi and made the post, and the post got as much notoriety as it did, or else the OP could have been in a horrific scenario. But I'm glad that Reddit clutched up, and those 2 people, were just kind strangers that did a good deed and helped the OP out, because, yeah, the OP was in a bad situation, but at least this one had a good ending. My husband accused me of murder out of the blue. How do I salvage this? Originally posted to r/relationship advice, and the post reads as follows. This is long and ridiculous. Sorry. My 30 female husband, Luke, who's 33 male, had a sister, Laura, 29 female. We were all close and saw each other 2 to 3 times a month, along with their parents. Almost 6 months ago, Laura fell down the stairs at their family home and died. It was a freak accident. There's a window on the half landing, and she hit her head on the sill. I was the last person to see her. I was there for less than 10 minutes, and she was in her pajamas making coffee. I didn't even stay for a drink, and I struggle with how such a brief and meaningless interaction could have been her last. She deserved so much more. My husband and I have only been married for a year, but we've been together for 4 and have known each other for 20 plus. When Laura's parents found her, they called my husband straight away and we rushed over. We faced the whole thing as a family. In the days after, Luke started quizzing me. Exactly what we talked about, what she was wearing, where we were standing, etc. It progressed to saying I was providing conflicting information on tiny details he was deliberately misunderstanding, and accusing me of withholding information because I couldn't tell him things like what pajamas she was wearing. This escalated quickly, but lasted for less than a week. As I lost my cool, it made it clear that I was done answering questions. He didn't bring it up again, and I wrote it off as a grief quirk. His behavior was generally that of a normal, grieving person. Last Friday, he outright accused me of murdering her in front of his parents, out of the blue. We were all stunned. There was an inquest which recently concluded, and there was never any doubt the verdict would be an accidental death. He said it was completely obvious, and he couldn't believe that no one else could see it. He claims I went through his phone and found messages with Laura. I have absolutely no idea what messages he's talking about. I have never looked at his phone, and that I went over to confront her and things got out of hand, and I pushed her down the stairs. By the end, he was shouting about going to the police and getting the inquest overturned. and how I wasn't going to get away with it. Let me be clear. Laura and I had a great relationship. We all did. I have no idea where this has come from, other than these messages I haven't seen, and even then, I don't think there's anything I could ever see on someone's phone that would drive me to murder. It's just ridiculous. He's been with his parents since this happened and will not talk to me at all. I've had some contact with his mom, but she's not being very communicative. The last I heard, she didn't know what messages he was referring to either. I am still completely stunned, and I have no idea how to proceed. I made a commitment to be there for him always, and I understand that grief can manifest in some strange ways. But part of me feels like my love for him died the second he called me a murderer, and I don't know how we could possibly work through this. I also really don't want to be thought of in this way, and I have no idea if he has said anything to people we know. I obviously haven't. A brain tumor or psychotic break has crossed my mind, and I suggested it to his mother, and she said she'll talk to him. Other than the questions before, he hasn't been acting odd. Obviously, he's been grieving, but he seemed sane and sensible other than that. I feel like I'm going mad. Does anyone have any advice at all? And now let's get into some of the top comments on this post. Someone says, "Fuck no. You don't salvage this. You get a lawyer and get the F out." Best case scenario, he has just admitted to sending messages with his sister that he thinks would make you angry enough to kill her over them. I have some ideas about what those might be, and they are all bad. How did the parents react when he did this? And then the OP responded saying, when he first laid out the accusation at his parents' house, both his mother and I just kept asking him about the messages, and all he would say was that I know exactly what messages he was talking about. She was as stunned as me, and his father just said he didn't understand what he was talking about. He's a man of few words, but there was plenty of head shaking. The whole thing was surreal. No one knew how to react. I honestly don't know what kind of lawyer I would even speak to about this. From what I'm aware, the coroner's decision can't be appealed and the police can't launch an investigation into an accidental death. I don't think I'm quite ready for divorce. We haven't spoken since his accusation, and I walked out about 5 minutes after he threw it out, and I have no idea what his frame of mind is. Someone else comments saying, you need to get a lawyer to protect yourself in case he does go to the police. I'd write down everything that you can remember that happened that day and keep it just in case. He may be having a psychotic break. As stated, don't talk to him or his immediate family or friends without someone present, or preferably by text or email. Save everything. You need to take his accusation seriously and cover your ass. And the OP responded saying, I was interviewed by the coroner's office after her death, as I was the last person to see her. She died about 3 hours after I saw her, and I'd been to the supermarket and was home by that point. It's all verifiable and was a recorded interview. I haven't spoken to anyone but his mother, and that's only been over messages. She's never been a big texter, but she has seemed very cagey over the past few days. I don't know if this means she's seen the messages I've asked and been ignored. Someone else responds to that thread saying, I think they mean record everything you remember about the day your soon-to-be ex accused you of murder. And the OP responds saying, I'm feeling so freaked out at the idea that he came up with this almost immediately after her death and has either been sitting on it or planning his confrontation. That I'm basically trying to dissect the past 6 months. Maybe it's time I start writing things down. Right until it happened, things felt very normal. Obviously, her death has been felt deeply by all of us, and things aren't anything like they were, but there have been no signs of anything like this, even on the day. And then a lot of commenters were asking the OP to get the messages, and the OP says, I'm absolutely desperate to see the messages, because I'm right there with you guys on the sheer wackiness of what they have to contain. It hadn't occurred to me that they might not exist. I've never known him to lie, but I do think a mental health issue is a real possibility. His relationship with his sister didn't seem odd, and I've never been interested in his phone, but he's never been defensive about it either. So I think you might be right. If I had such incriminating messages, I'd probably worry about them before now. And then someone recommends the OP to find an old iPad to use to access them, and the OP makes an update saying, I have his iCloud password. It has a backup from yesterday. I have no idea how to turn this into something I can actually use. It doesn't have a messages folder or any signs of how to use it for anything other than restoring a whole phone, which I don't want to do. Does anyone know how to actually get the messages from this? Sorry to throw a tech support request in. I can't believe I didn't think of this. Huge thanks to the person who suggested it. And then the OP makes another post about a day later titled, Can I force my husband to get a mental health assessment? And do I risk being arrested/prosecuted? We are in England. And the post reads as follows. I'm in a bizarre and complex situation with my husband. I have broken the law, and I feel I have no choice but to do so again for my safety. I don't know what type of solicitor I need or what the next steps should look like. We are in England, and I'll try not to editorialize too much. My husband's sister died suddenly at the start of the year. Her death was an accident, and there was no suggestion to the contrary. The inquest was recently concluded, and a verdict of accidental death returned. I was the last person to see her, but her time of death, which was almost immediate due to her injury, was confirmed to be hours after I left the house. All of this was verified at the time. In the immediate aftermath, my husband behaved strangely and kept trying to trip up my story of the last time we saw each other, which was a brief interaction. Last week, months after this was first and last mentioned, he outright accused me of murder in front of his parents. He says I saw his messages with his sister and confronted her, and that he's going to have the coroner decision overturned and have the police investigate. I haven't seen or heard from him since today. I posted for advice on Reddit. I'm pretty desperate at this point, and it has spooked me, quite reasonably I think, but also led me to committing a crime and planning another. My husband's iCloud credentials were saved on an old iPad in his office, and I downloaded his backup last night. I have read all of his messages with his sister, and there is absolutely nothing like he describes. I understand this is illegal, and I'm concerned about the possible ramifications. I'm also waiting for a call back from a locksmith to change the locks on the home we own together, which I believe is also against the law. So this leads to my actual questions. I feel justified in what I've done for my safety, but is there a degree of pragmatism under the law for these issues because of the situation, or am I shooting myself in the foot? I am resigned to the fact my relationship is over, but his parents don't seem to be taking this seriously, and they're icing me out. I believe this is a serious mental health issue, which may put people, namely me, at risk. Can I do anything about this when all I have is the fact I'm being accused of murder? I feel he needs to be detained, and this should be investigated as a full-blown psychotic break. Sorry, this is all a bit mental. In addition, what type of solicitor do I need? My understanding is that a coroner decision can't be appealed, is that correct? Are his accusations going to go anywhere? Can I protect myself from this or stop him from escalating to telling others? We live in our hometown and everyone knows everyone. This could follow me forever, and it's either a lie or a delusion. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. And then, now let's get into some of the top comments. Some people suggest that the OP can't lock out her husband or force him to get a psych evaluation. And the OP then says, thank you so much for your response. Locking each other out doesn't sound like a pattern I want to get into, but I think I'll go ahead and change them once on the basis that it isn't, quote, you did this, so you have to leave the house, and also you'll be prosecuted levels of seriousness. In terms of him being deemed to lack capacity, is there any way I can trigger the process that you know of? Is something like this sufficient for the Mental Health Act to kick in? I've been Googling and, quote, you can be detained if professionals think your mental health puts you or others at risk and you need to be in a hospital. Seems very vague. Obviously, I'm biased, but accusing someone of murder and screaming about how they aren't going to be getting away with it feels like risky behavior. Does he need to have made explicit threats, or is there a clearer bar to meet? Sorry for asking so many questions. And then another commenter says, you are jumping ahead of yourself and playing out situations that have not occurred. If your husband reports you to the police for assessing his data, and you are subsequently arrested or taken in for questioning, then obtain the services of a criminal solicitor for advice. With respect of changing locks/ending your marriage, seek a solicitor that deals with family law/divorce. If you feel that you are at risk from your husband, talk to a domestic abuse helpline. If you feel you are at immediate risk of harm, then call the police. If you think your husband is mentally ill and presents a risk to himself or others, call the police. And then the OP responds saying, I don't think that's a fair assessment. Being accused of arguably the most serious crime to exist has most definitely occurred. My understanding of the law is that something is illegal whether you are reported to the police or not. Those messages are evidence as far as I'm concerned that his accusations are false. They were apparently the trigger to me literally murdering someone I was extremely close to. I have illegally accessed them, and I don't think it's unreasonable to inquire as to the potential impact of that. I'm fully aware that I need a solicitor, but as you're probably aware, today is Sunday. I don't know if I need to seek someone out based on a divorce, which honestly, if this is a mental health issue, is not going to be something I go for, or a criminal solicitor, or someone who deals with the Mental Health Act, as my absolute priority preference is getting him assessed. My only exposure to the legal system in my entire life was through the inquest, and that is obviously completely different to any of this. I'm not educated in this area. And then another commenter says, it's sad and slightly suspicious that OP is jumping ahead to mental health assessments to defend themselves from accusations of murder when their husband is clearly going through some serious issues, coping with the death of his sister. And the OP responds saying, what else can I do? He has blocked me everywhere. And we went from a normal couple dealing with the new normal 6 months after the death of his sister to me being accused of murder over a family dinner because of messages which clearly don't exist. And it's been 9 days and I've heard nothing since. Can I remind you that the inquest was held and concluded? I dropped off some Tupperware, grabbed an umbrella I'd left behind the previous week, went to a big Tesco, then went home and called my mom. I was already home by the time she died, and my whereabouts were extremely easy to verify because my husband was home all day. It's obvious that he's going through some serious issues coping with the death of his sister. That is the exact point of all of this. And then the OP makes another post a few days later titled, Update. My husband has accused me of murder. Out of the blue, how do I salvage this? And then the post reads as follows. Firstly, thank you for those who helped me to get to my husband's iCloud backups through an old iPad. I wasn't expecting much from Reddit, but I got valuable practical advice before my post was locked, and I appreciate it. There were no crazy or even suspicious messages. I've searched for over 100 terms and scrolled back over years. I saw a side of them both I wasn't expecting, but nothing that explains the claim I murdered Laura over their chats. Nothing to suggest he was cheating. Absolutely nothing to suggest sibling love, if you get what I mean. I repeat, no sibling love. No weird gaps where deleted conversations or a switch to another app would fit. Just siblings making plans, sending memes, and gossiping. They said unexpectedly horrible stuff about a few people, but not me. It was a sort of relief, but it raised more questions than it answered. I sought legal advice, also from Reddit, after posting here. Turns out my options are divorce him or sit down. I contacted my community mental health team, who said they'd reach out, but made it clear it wasn't urgent. I then called his mom and said that if I didn't hear from him by this weekend, I would get a solicitor and ask for a mental health assessment as part of the divorce. In response, he made a ridiculous post to Facebook, which neither of us have used in years, and everything blew up. I'm going to try to keep this succinct. On Friday night, he made a long accusation on Facebook with new information. He said he'd been planning to leave me for months with his sister's support, and I found the messages and murdered her. The coroner has reopened the case and the police are preparing to arrest me, and he needs to make sure people know before the trial stops him talking about it. It was well written and seemed vaguely plausible. He messaged people links so it gave some attention. We live in our hometown and have a large circle of friends because we've been here all our lives. People I haven't spoken to since high school were reaching out to me asking what the fuck was going on. It was madness. In response, I posted the export of his entire conversation history for Laura, also to Facebook, when I finally got back in. I linked to the chat along with a post explaining my side, and nothing that I changed my ex's iCloud and Apple passwords, and that if he wanted them back, he should comment on my post and update his own, admitting that he was lying. He eventually did. When I started getting messages about his post, I panicked, and changing his passwords seemed important to preserve everything because he'd know I had access. When I spoke to him the next morning, it's clear he's not having a mental episode at all, but is claiming one because he's been caught in a big lie. As soon as he was outed, he called me, clearly drunk, begging and promising to explain everything if I deleted my post. I hung up and told him to call back the next day. He did, after many missed calls and texts, and he tried to bargain and guilt trip me with his mental health until it was clear the wrong people had seen this conversation. It's hard to describe, but it seemed fake. It was too well rehearsed, and then this morning, when it was clear he was getting nowhere, he blocked me. Begging for mercy and reciting facts about mental disorders doesn't align with someone in crisis with a sincere belief that someone murdered their sibling. The question of why he did all this remains unanswered, and he will not be getting his passwords until it is. The legal advice subreddit said this stuff is technically illegal, but it's beneath a court to take action. So I'm going to count on that because I felt like I had no other choice at the time. And now I don't see any other way to get answers from him. I am desperate, and it's all I've got. So there we are. The relationship I have believed was my destiny since I was a teenager has boiled down to a petty, convoluted, and vindictive bullshit played out on social media for reasons still unknown. My hope for a brain tumor is fading, and clearly tomorrow morning is going to be when I lawyer up and stop posting about this. I am mortified. I have no idea whether some people might believe him, and I still don't know why this all happened in the first place. Sorry I don't have a happier update, and thanks once again to everyone who offered advice. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, "Wow, OP, I'm so sorry. This is not the update I expected because it's even more bizarre. Can you provide more info on how people reacted and why he confessed to lying without explaining why? It was obvious his post was fake. Is that it? If he wanted a divorce, this is the dumbest way to ever go about it. I just can't understand his thinking at all. Again, I'm so sorry. What a nightmare for you." And then the OP responds to that saying, "He didn't react at all. He'd called me tens of times at that point, and we'd had 5 conversations on the phone about it. He was laser focused on me deleting the chat log from the get-go. But when I made it clear that posting that comment and editing his original Facebook post was the only way to progress the conversation at all, he finally did. Then he went silent publicly, as far as I can see, but continued begging me behind the scenes." Wow, this is wildly weird. And then someone else comments saying, "What on earth is in those chats that he's so desperate to keep people from seeing? And that would conceivably lead you to kill someone? Is there any chance they're using some kind of code or something?" And the OP responds saying, "I think it was the fact that it proved his story false. Alongside the way they spoke about some people, it was really damaging stuff, and I can see why he panicked. I hated to do it to him, but I really couldn't think of anything else because so many people had questions." Someone else says, "Sounds like he's staging a mental issue to get rid of you or create a reason he's not responsible. Cheating? Money missing from work? Personal or family?" And the OP responds saying, "This is exactly how it comes across. He kept saying how various behaviors he's shown over the years fit anxiety and depression. They don't. And that his vulnerability has led to a complex grief-related breakdown. He is not particularly informed on mental health issues, so I don't understand how he went from a drunken shambles to that level of insight overnight, when he had apparently been in active crisis, posting horrible lies on Facebook less than 2 hours before calling me initially. You make an interesting point about finances. That could be something weird, but definitely not to the extent that it explains any of this. When Laura died, she had a loan and credit account that no one knew about. The total on them was less than £3,000. And I don't know what happened because they weren't mentioned much after they came up initially, but everyone was a bit surprised. She lived for the weekend and going away with the girls, so it wasn't hugely suspicious, and it was confirmed there were no unusual transactions in her account, but it was odd. She was saving to move out, so she was pretty open about her finances, generally because she was excited about her savings goals. I don't think it points to anything, but I'm at a point where anything could be relevant because it's all such a mess. And then the OP makes an update, posted 6 days later, and the update reads as follows. Hi everyone, me again. Both times I've posted here, it has paid off hugely in terms of helping unravel this mess. So I hope it's third time lucky. For the past few weeks, I've been trying to figure out why my husband suddenly accused me of murdering his sister, who died in an accident at home 6 months ago. It still feels as ridiculous now as it did then. When Laura died, we found out she had about £3,000 in hidden debt. It was odd because she was pretty open about her finances, but it wasn't out of character for her to overspend, so I hadn't really thought about it since. A comment on my last post prompted me to look more closely at money stuff, and a message to my husband from Laura asking about a payment stuck out. I'd initially assumed it was about a car issue she'd had a few weeks before she died, but Luke definitely paid at the garage when they picked it up, because we talked about it after she dropped him home. It didn't occur to me when I first looked through. The messages supposedly proved I was a murderer, so I've been looking for something scandalous. The message about payments was the only thing I had at that point, and I had no idea what it meant, so I took a chance. I told his mother I knew about the money, and that if he didn't get in touch with me that day, I would make sure everybody else did too. He called me straight away and asked me over to his parents' house to talk. He looked dreadful, and the first thing he asked me was whether I was happy now all of his friends hate him. And I told him I don't give a fuck about his relationships and that I was there for answers. It turns out my husband told the coroner's office that he was secretly helping Laura pay some of her debt because she was embarrassed and struggling to keep up with her lifestyle. I assume it didn't seem suspicious because her death was clearly an accident, and that's what they were investigating. In reality, he took out loans and store cards in her name, and she somehow found out a few weeks before she died. Some guy he works with had apparently done it before and arranged it all, and if Laura hadn't found out, he claims they could have had it written off without her even knowing. When she did find out, the guy left him high and dry, and he had to pay it off. I'm inclined to believe that's the gist of what happened, but I am shocked my husband would do something this stupid. When she died so soon after, his brief and apparently genuine suspicion was that she had told me about it that day, and we argued, and I killed her. He couldn't explain why I would kill someone because they were a victim of fraud, but according to him, he felt guilty in the immediate aftermath, and his brain made it fit. I mostly believed this, but he tried launching into more weaponized therapy speak at that point, so I cut the topic off. A few months after his sister's death, Luke received a letter from a credit card company, not even the police, saying he was being investigated. Laura didn't have much, so her debts, which were less than £10,000 even with the fraud, were mostly written off. Something obviously flagged against my husband during that process. I don't know how or why. When the letters got more threatening, he believed the investigation would reopen the inquest, and that he would be accused of fraud, perjury, and because of his previously unknown motive, possibly murder. He claims the only thing the company investigating him actually knows is that the fraud came from our address, so accusing me would make it impossible to prove because it would be a coin toss, his words, as to which one of us took out the credit in Laura's name. That was worth our entire marriage to him, and my reputation in the community we have been a part of for our entire lives. He says self-preservation kicked in, and nothing else mattered when he thought about what could happen to him. When I asked him how his witness statement fits into his plan, because it proved he lied either way by acknowledging he knew about the debt and paying it, he froze for roughly a million years before saying he hadn't thought of that. Obviously, my response was to ask why. If he hadn't thought of it, he specifically said it was a lie he needed to cover earlier in the conversation. Suddenly, he's sobbing and his parents are rushing in to ask me to leave. I was in tears at this point, asking how the fuck he could do this to me over something so stupid and how much his parents knew about this. as his mom was pushing me out of the house. All she said was that she couldn't have had this conversation with me. She was crying too, but wouldn't say another word. I am now 99% sure the fucker was trying to frame me. Not for her death, but for the fraud. He was going to claim that he was lying for me in the coroner's interview, right? If he wrapped it all up as quietly paying her off on my behalf than genuinely suspecting me for a murder, it would protect his reputation and point the finger at me. It just doesn't make sense any other way. Is my husband trying to frame me to weasel out of his actions? And how do I get to the bottom of this? I'm obviously open to theories because Reddit is the only reason I got this far in the first place. That being said, please don't come up with conspiracies about Laura's death in the comments. It's upsetting. She was wearing shitty old slippers and walking upstairs with a cup of tea, and she slipped and hit her head on a windowsill. This was never a murder mystery. It was someone's life, and she died just because. Maybe a butterfly flapped its wings somewhere. I don't know, but it's hard enough to accept without having guesses shouted at me on the internet whilst my marriage falls apart. And now let's get into some of the top comments. Someone says, I mean, framing you for fraud seems the most plausible from what you found, though it's an incredibly idiotic frame job that wouldn't work. So I have to say, he sounds incredibly dumb. As an explanation, it's probably the best you are going to get, though very unsatisfying. I am mystified by his parents' behavior and what he thought that Facebook post was going to accomplish. It's not like the investigators are going to go poll the town. He could have just written back to them that he knew nothing about these cards, and the only people at that address were you and him. There was no need in this weird plot to ruin your reputation publicly. But again, he sounds very dumb, so I guess that made sense to him. So, sorry this happened to you, but I suspect in several years' time, hopefully sooner, you will see being rid of him and his family was actually a blessing. I wish you your very best life going forward. And the OP responds saying, this is what I don't understand. He's behaved impulsively before, but never anything like this. I understand that he didn't take the fraud seriously until he was caught by Laura. And I can get that her death would have made him anxious about it, but I don't know what would possess him to think he could just pass it along. It's baffling. Someone else says, what's also strange is that it sounds like the fraud amount was low enough that, while yes, he'd get in trouble, it isn't like he's going to be ruined. Not that this is a good thing, but white-collar crime is not exactly strongly prosecuted in the UK. Plus, it sounds like a repayment settlement could have solved this. Unless he worked in finance or needs a security clearance, this wouldn't be something he couldn't recover from. Also, very odd is that you were his alibi for the accident. I realize that wasn't necessary, as this was an accident regardless of alibis, but still, it's very dumb if he was worried about this being known as a motive, that he would alienate his alibi. I keep coming back to the dumb part. Only explanation that makes sense, lol. And then the OP responds saying, this is exactly it. £3,000 would have been manageable. He could have set up a plan to repay it over a year, and he'd have needed to tighten up, but would have been fine. It was a private company, so getting their money back would obviously be more of a priority than seeking prosecution. This is also part of why his story doesn't make sense. It's such a small amount in the grand scheme of things to blow up your entire life. The only thing I can think of is pure desperation to protect his reputation, but even then, who goes that far? And then someone else says, is he someone that really prides himself on his reputation? Is his job in finances? And the OP responds saying, he's a mechanic, so he's got a bit of a masculine pride thing going on. He always wants to be seen as a good, quote, salt of the earth, do anything for anyone type of person. And whilst actually being a good person sometimes slips, usually in the way he talks to people after a drink, never ever to the point where I'd think he'd take loans out in people's names or try to ruin me like this. And then someone else says, I'm sure you've been asked this before, but is he on drugs? And then the OP responds saying, he's a casual drug user, but I've never seen signs of it getting unhealthy. He does booger sugar maybe 8 to 10 times per year, and I've never known him buy it when his money would have been better spent on something else. He's better at spending money than having it generally, but he's never ever shown signs of being greedy or deceitful. The only thing I can think of is that it would have been in the lead up to Christmas, but his gifts weren't particularly extravagant, so I don't think it was a desperate attempt at a magical Christmas. And that is the last update we have ever got from the OP, but just such a wild saga and so weird. I mean, why would the OP's husband ruin his life over a $3,000 debt? I mean, yes, that's not nothing, but at the same time, it's manageable, like they talked about. And so why would he blow up everything in his life, frame his wife for murder, do this and that and the other thing for a $3K debt? And it seems like we are missing something that the husband is possibly hiding, but I don't know. The OP has since deleted their account, so we are not getting any updates anytime soon, but super weird. And I'm interested to hear your guys' theories in the comments, but I'm kind of at a loss for words. This is just such a wild saga of posts, and I just don't know why the husband would do that, and I just feel so bad for the OP that their entire life got blown up over this super weird thing that went on. I mean, yeah, just such a wild saga of posts.